Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a few moments. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein, and welcome to the 34th installment of my weekly virtual office hours. Welcome to November. 2020 is almost over. People continue to say that they really appreciate this weekly live stream address, hearing from their mayor, so I'll continue to do it through the end of shelter in place and probably a lot longer. The Facebook live stream, event is really great because it allows me to give you updates, answer some of your questions, and of course, give you some general words of encouragement. Thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during ever-changing times. I hope that everyone is doing well, staying healthy. Please remember to take care of yourself, both physically and mentally. This has been a very stressful week for many people. And, these are difficult times for many. So, keep following the county health orders. We're still at the orange tier, luckily. But easily we're on the verge of going back into the red if we have a big surge of cases. So, people, you need to do what you can do to stop the spread of the virus. So, continue to wash your hands, don't touch your face, reduce the number of people you come in contact with on a daily basis. And of course, wear your mask. It does help. It's mandatory. And, from my standpoint, I think it's really made a difference as far as, trying to keep the number of cases of COVID-19 down in our county. So, as I've said before, if you need a face covering, please contact me. I still have some. I still have people, donating a few more. Not as much as we once had, but we're not out of the woods yet. You can be asymptomatic, or someone you can meet can be asymptomatic, not have any symptoms, and so just to make and so everyone wearing a mask, when you're meeting anyone outside of your bubble is really important. So we're now 235 days after March 16th, county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. So, since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot more happens every day. I have daily press conferences almost to watch, seminars to attend, conference calls to confer and advocate on your behalf. So, you know, uh, for me, I think it's been, and people continue to say that they really appreciate these. So I think that is important to try to kind of condense everything that's happening in our world down to manageable parts, and hopefully this helps people on a weekly basis. So let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at a federal, state, county, and city level over the last week or so. First, last Monday, Santa Clara County supervisors and others had a press conference to basically talk about a safe election. And so that was really important to say that we're prepared for whatever happens from a county standpoint, and it will be safe to vote. And so voting stations opened last Saturday, so October 31st, and there were almost 100 voting stations around the county, but we didn't have any fake ballot boxes. We hadn't seen any signs of voter suppression or intimidation. And then the other thing is the county registrar talked about that they would have the election certified within 30 days. So, and even Chief No was there to talk about, what all of the police departments, public safety throughout the county, the sheriff's department throughout the county was ready to deal with any electioneering or campaigning that's happening near the voting centers, but none of that occurred as far as I know, and things went fairly smoothly this week as far as voting is concerned. Last Wednesday, Governor Newsom gave his standard press conference talking about fires, and more importantly, the cases of COVID in the state have been trending up, and so it was going to be watched closely. And then talking about the concept of a COVID-19 vaccine, and working with other West Coast governors to look at the review of that vaccine, as well as putting in place a plan for distribution. And that's a big thing as far as those vaccines. Some of them have very, very low storage requirements. So 60 degrees C, which is, 60 degrees below, which was to me, very difficult. And so having a plan, and also almost all the potential vaccines have 2 doses, 1 dose, and then the second dose 21 days. So having a plan in place from a federal standpoint as well as a state standpoint is really important when those vaccines start coming out. So that's and also kind of a priority as far as healthcare workers and frontline responders. So it's important for as we're looking at getting a potential vaccine, how that will be distributed, how it'll be stored, all of that. Not looking, and I've had several calls with county health over the last 2 weeks, just to set people's expectations accordingly. We probably wouldn't have a distribution within our within the state to residents, not frontline workers, not first responders, and for another 6 to 8 months. So just to set people's expectations, but having a vaccine sometime in November or December for those essential workers is critical. So, but that's that I think that's important from a planning standpoint, and as far as a distribution standpoint, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The other thing was, let's see, okay, last Thursday, Whole Foods had their grand opening, and several council members and city staff toured the building on Wednesday. So there wasn't a big ribbon cutting. It was kind of low key, and I think that's the world we live in right now. But Whole Foods had their ribbon cutting or had their grand opening. It was actually, you know, I was in the store actually earlier today. It looks really good inside. It has, it's going to be really nice when things are more open, but it's fully stocked. The aisles are a lot wider than a lot of stores. It has a good amount of takeout food and a brew pub and coffee bar, and I think it's a really nice environment. So if you haven't had a chance yet to take a look, definitely consider that. They do have senior hours that are 7 to 8 a.m. on Friday mornings. So if you feel if you have someone in your household that doesn't feel safe or has basically a compromised immune system, they do have those special hours. So that's important also. And then last Thursday, also, the Governor Newsom signed an executive order. Actually, he signed several, but probably the biggest one is that for people 70 years old and over, they can still renew their driver's license by mail. They don't need to go to DMV offices while the COVID-19 pandemic continues. So that's an important kind of operational standpoint from a DMV that the governor extended. Last Friday, the AMC movie theaters that's just above the Whole Foods officially opened its doors. So at 5:30 p.m., they had their first movies start up. And under the orange tier, the movie theaters were allowed to have 25% seating, and I was actually at one of those first shows. And what's good is when you reserve a seat, they reserve the seats around you, so to make sure that there's appropriate buffering so that we are meeting that 25% requirement. Initially, they said that they weren't going to be open because the county has required that no concessions, no food or drink be sold in the theaters. But AMC made a decision statewide and across the nation that even in states that were requiring that, they would still go ahead and open up, mainly because they want to show that they can still be safe, that they can provide appropriate protections, and there are multiple plexiglass, multiple plexiglass containers or barriers between the workers, and everybody was in a mask. Everybody there was in a mask. I felt very safe. There were probably around 7 people in the theater, so it was actually very good from that standpoint. And hopefully we'll see that open up a little bit more if we can move from the orange tier into the yellow tier. But right now, I think that's been very good, and it's good to show, support this brand new business. It's very clean. It's very, it's great to be inside. I'm going to have a bigger tour later today. Definitely, I had a tour beginning of March when they were planning to open at the end of March, and then COVID happened. So it'll be good to see, how things finished up. They were almost finished when I toured at the beginning of March of this year. So if you get a chance, if you feel safe to go to the theaters, they are now open. And one of the things that from a movie industry standpoint, California has a lot of requirements as far as that's concerned. That's a big industry here, and to see, movies coming back into the theaters, and I know that there's at least 1 or 2 big movies that are still supposed to be released by the end of the year. So to see that starting to at least gain a little momentum, even under COVID-19, I think is important. Last Friday, Governor Newsom cut the ribbon on California's new laboratory in Valencia, and this was, an attempt to increase the number of testing that the amount of testing that we could do, as well as the turnaround within the state. So this was a $25 million lab that was built in conjunction with Perkin-Elmer, which was processing, which basically it's a big diagnostic company, but they'll start processing testing starting later in November. And this will work towards, a planned capacity of 150,000 tests by March. So hopefully, and that will increase our, COVID-19 response as far as capacity and turnaround. I think that will be critical as we continue to open up. Getting a vaccine is good, but they won't have not everyone will be vaccinated, and we'll have to see what kind of response we have as far as the vaccines are concerned. Last Saturday was Halloween. It was the last day of market with the mayor before election day, and I hope I had market with the mayor back in January and February before COVID-19 started, and hopefully someday I'll restart it. But it was kind of the last get out the vote weekend before election day. And it was also Halloween day, so it was good to see a lot of kids and parents in their costumes out at the market. And being Halloween, it was also the Sunnyvale Pet Parade. The Pet Parade went virtual this year, so if you haven't had a chance to watch all the photos of families and some videos of pets in Halloween costumes, or families, or some video actually from last year's event that was sprinkled in there. Go visit sunnyvalepetparade.com and take a look when you get a chance. The video was released last Saturday at 10 a.m. and you still have a chance to watch it on YouTube when you get a chance. Of course, Tuesday was election day, and thankfully, things went smoothly. There were no local reports of intimidation at our polls, and it was estimated that 60% of Californian registered voters had voted before election day. So, there were a lot of last-minute ballots turned in. There were a lot of people that voted in person. There were a lot of people that dropped off at their ballot boxes, or just mailed in their ballot depending upon where they were. And so from that standpoint, let me do a quick rundown of positions and measures a little bit later. But first, I want to thank everyone who helped out on my campaign, who donated, who walked precincts, campaigned for me at the farmers market. They put up lawn signs, or just got the word out through Zoom meetings, through phone calls, through forwarding emails. All of that helped, and I really appreciate it. Your encouragement, your appreciation has been almost overwhelming this week. Prior to election day, the number of people that I had tell me, okay, I voted for you, our family voted for you, is really, really heartwarming for me. I appreciate all the feedback I've got, as mayor, for people that have said that, they appreciate the efforts that I've shown over the last 2 years as mayor, but especially over the last, 8 months, 9 months now, during COVID. So, voting isn't finished statewide or nor nationally. There's still lots of ballots to be counted. I will go through at least some of the local races. For the mayor's race, I'm leading with about 37% of the vote, and so it's not complete. Precinct reporting, and so this is somewhat confusing if you go to the county registrar's webpage. From precincts reporting, 100% of precincts reported. That means that all the same day voting, all the election day voting results were turned in, and anything that happened the 4 days before election day, so Halloween forward, all those results were turned in. And any any ballots that they were able to count that had been turned in, or mail-in ballots that were able to count before Election Day, polls closed, those were all released on Election Day. So from their estimate, about 52% at 8 p.m. on election night were already counted, and they were able to release those numbers. That being said, so they continue to count votes, and we're out at about 67% of the total number of votes for the county counted. So they release counts. They were releasing them twice a day. Now they're going to once a day. So at 5 p.m. every day, they'll be releasing new numbers. The positive thing for me is the gap between number one and number two continues to increase. So my gap over my nearest competitor, which was the vice mayor, Nancy Smith, continues to increase. So that seems to be fairly positive. So it's over 1,100 votes now, and still relatively close. And I want to thank Nancy and Michael for clean campaigns. We have disagreement on some of the issues, but in general, it's been a good dialogue. From the candidate forums or other other public forums that I think have been very worthwhile. But it looks like from I want to appreciate all the votes that I got, all the people that came out and voted. I think it shows that I would have much preferred a higher percentage, but this is my third 3-person race. So I had in August of 2016, I had a 33-person race. In November of 2016, I had a 3-person race, and then again for mayor this year, I had a 3-person race. So not getting more than 50% of the vote is a kind of not a given, but does become more common when you have more than 2 candidates. So it is difficult at times, but from my standpoint, it is part of the election process. There have been talks, and one of the things that when we approved Measure B with 6 districts plus a directly elected mayor that was elected at large, before that, all elections were at large, and whenever you had more than 2 candidates, that was always a possibility. It was discussed whether or not we could do ranked choice voting or adding a primary into the whole mix. But that being said, it was trying to keep the election, the ballot measure and the charter changes as easy as possible. When Santa Clara tried to convert to district elections a few years ago, they mixed in ranked choice voting into the district election decision at the same time, and voters ended up saying no, because at that point the Santa Clara registrar was still working on trying to even getting ranked choice voting working on our voting machines. So I think this will continue to be a discussion as far as what makes sense for Sunnyvale. Going forward, we're going to be looking at redistricting based upon the census next year. So there's lots of important things about voting that still need to be discussed. That being said, from a city standpoint, it looks like from a voting standpoint, it's pretty positive. I'm cautiously optimistic that I will be the mayor come January. So thank you for everyone who supported me. Thank you for everyone who did whatever they could to get out the word to vote for Mayor Klein. Let me go through some of the other district elections. So in District 2, and all these are preliminary, much like the mayor's vote, Elisa Cisneros, so that's the downtown district, seems to be the winner. So that was also a 3-person race. And so we talk about the 3-person race versus the 2-person race. District 4, which is in southeastern Sunnyvale, was a 2-person race. So Russ Melton, who's already on council, was elected as the district council member in District 4. And so that he has I think he has around 75% of the vote, but that was, a two-person race. So congratulations to Russ, congratulations to Elisa. And then in District 6, which is the north part of Sunnyvale, it was Omar Din. So Omar, it was another three-person race, and so that was fairly split also. I think he has around 40% of the vote. Last I read, 42%, something of that nature, 45% of the vote. So Omar, and these numbers will change, these percentages will change as, we're currently at only 67% of the vote. So we only have about 2/3 of the vote counted, but those percentages and just tracking them over the last few days haven't really changed that much. So, that's fairly certain that those will be our new council members. So we'll have, two new council members on city council come January. And so that, that's new and definitely kind of representing a younger Sunnyvale, as well as adding more diversity onto our council. So all those things are positive from a city standpoint, and hopefully help, add to the diversity of and represent the diversity that really makes Sunnyvale so special. From a regional election standpoint, I wanted to kind of go through who your new representatives will be. So our county supervisor will be Otto Lee. So he has about 60% of the vote over Kansan Chu right now. And, I've been working with Otto for many years. He was a council member. Well, he was elected to city council back in 2003. And I ended up finishing his term on the planning commission. So, that was that. So I've been working with Otto for many years. So he was on council for 8 years. He was mayor. And ultimately now he will be our new county supervisor for the north half of Sunnyvale, kind of above El Camino. The south half of Sunnyvale is represented by County Supervisor Joe Smidian. The other thing is congratulations to our new state senator. So Josh Becker took over, is winning pretty much with a large percentage of the vote over his competitor. And so he will be replacing Jerry Hill as our state senator, and then Mark Berman was reelected as our state assembly member. So, and then from a federal level, Ro Khanna was reelected as our Congress member. So we have a few new people and a few of our representatives that have been reelected. And then as far as local propositions, Measure M, so the Fremont Union High School District parcel tax passed, and that passed with about 73% of the votes. And one of the measures that I was had a lot took literature with me when I was walking precincts, when I was tabling at the market. Measure RR looks like it has passed now, and that was for a 1/8 cent sales tax estimate for Caltrain, and that's estimated to be about $108 million annually for 30 years. And so this was critical as a lifeline during COVID, but more important from the long-term financial future of Caltrain. It was important that all three counties, so San Jose, San Mateo, and San Francisco County, that they all needed to pass that with 2/3. And so it passed with 74% in San Francisco, 71% in 71% of the vote in San Mateo, and 67% of the vote in Santa Clara. So, there's still votes to be counted, but in general, that seems to have passed for all three counties, which was critical. And to me, that was really important in the long-term transportation future for the Bay Area. For every person that's on Caltrain, it's one less person in a car or in a bus traveling up and down 101, up and down 280. It's really critical because it from a Caltrain standpoint, we're moving towards electrification, which will be fantastic. Once we electrify, trains will be able to have a lot more trains. But the other thing is, we'll be able to have a lot more bullet trains going north and south. So as we look at, getting around from San Jose to San Francisco, anywhere around the bay, this kind of the West Bay, it's really important to be able to provide the infrastructure from a transportation standpoint that gets people to work, it gets people to school, wherever they need to go very easily. And the transportation center from a Sunnyvale standpoint is really important because we put both housing and office space near the Caltrain stations. So at downtown, at Lawrence Station, both of those are really hubs of activity for our city. We have a whole Lawrence Station specific plan just around how we add housing, and that's one of the things that Santa Clara has been doing, but we're also doing how we add housing as well as office space near Caltrain, which I think is one of our, from a city standpoint, one of the best options that we have. So that was important that Measure RR passed, and then Measure S also is passing, and that was the Santa Clara Valley Water District parcel tax, and that's passed with 81% of the vote. And from that standpoint, it basically every few years we re-upped the parcel tax just to make sure that we had safe water, and we have a lot of big projects for water storage and water distribution within the county that are moving forward. That was really important, and I'm happy to see that's passed. From a state standpoint, a lot of the state propositions are still being counted. A lot of them a few of them are still close. We've had, I think we have about 4.5 million votes yet to be counted across the state. So there's still some of the ballot measures that could change. Prop 15, which is the change on property tax, mainly for businesses, that is still close. It's very close. Prop 22, the gig worker carve out for what's an independent contractor, the most expensive proposition in state history, where Lyft and Uber and DoorDash spent about $200 million on that. It looks like that carve out did pass. And Prop 24, which increased privacy, that law passed. So that's just a quick rundown of kind of what's happened from an election standpoint, from a proposition standpoint. Of course, from a national standpoint, the votes for president are still being counted. Former Vice President Biden is close to getting the required electoral count, but there's still lots of talk of finishing the counts, possible recounts and lawsuits. So this is going to take a while. Please, relax. Things will work themselves out over the next few weeks. But that's the biggest thing is, okay, election day has happened. We'll get through this. Things will work themselves out. For me, it's been a stressful few weeks, leading up to election day, trying to get it, that last vote out there. It's time to relax a little bit, take a deep breath. I understand that people have been focused on watching, national news, local news, state news. From my standpoint, take a breath, take a walk around the block, while it's still sunny and the rains are coming, the winds are coming. It is fall, but we're finally going to get some of our first rain. So hopefully people will feel positive about this election. That's the best thing about our democracy and going through the vote system. Going through and having people heard, whether or not definitely some of the state propositions, especially, didn't go the direction I was hoping, but that's part of kind of the whole election process. So hopefully people did their civic duty and took part of that. So thank you. And next I want to kind of give you an update of some upcoming events. So this Tuesday, council will meet, and it's not going to be going past 1 a.m. like it has for the last two meetings. We have a little bit lighter load, and part of those are things that have carried over from previous meetings. So we'll have our budget update. That was basically, we requested a quarterly budget update after the uncertainty of approving this year's fiscal budget. Things look fairly good as far as getting where we are with the end of last year's how much money we spent. So revenues are looking not as bad as we thought. We also have a certain amount of CARES Act funding that we need to approve. So we've got additional money coming in from the federal government. So all those things are positive from the operation of the city. The other thing is we're going to be looking at the art master plan. So we talked about this a little bit, but I'm a big proponent for the arts and spreading arts within the community, getting people more involved in art. I think it helps both beautify and just improves what the feel is for our community. So we're looking at approving the new master plan for public art. And part of that is introducing an ordinance, amending the current Sunnyvale ordinance to increase the percentage of art, that art requirement from 1% to 1.5%. So, any office building that's built, any public building that's built, 1% of the cost of that building needs to go towards art currently. And so we're talking about raising that to 1.5%. If you look historically at what's being spent at the majority of these office buildings, most of them have already spent beyond 1.5%. So making it part of the ordinance was also, kind of just to make sure that anybody that was staying at the bare minimum went a little bit farther. And then conceivably, if they didn't spend that money on their art, they could donate to the city for potential funding of small programs within the city. So we'll look at implementing the public art master plan, also allocating $50,000 to our first kind of project, which is a public art fund. So we have a public art fund, and we're looking at implementing a utility box art project. So a lot of cities around us already have that the utility boxes on the street, they have a program to get artists, get groups in the community together, get students together to paint art, basically beautify the utility boxes sitting on our streets. So hopefully that will move forward. I gave multiple examples of what other cities are doing to city staff. So hopefully, once that's approved, that process will go quickly, and you'll see that roll out hopefully next year. So we'll see what council's approval is as far as that's concerned. And then just to give you a little, and this will happen in the future, but let me give you a quick update now. There's multiple Moffett Park outreach meetings planned, and this will start late in November and go through the next few months. But we're changing how the Moffett Park, the outreach is going to happen. So what's been happening previously is there's been, Zoom meetings, especially under COVID, of getting public outreach or in-person meetings, and then those are summarized, and then there's a study session that council has to hear all of the public input and then give direction to staff. So what we've kind of envisioned is changing how that works so that there will be 2 hours of public feedback that we'll hear, presentations, breakout rooms, whatever. And then there will be an immediately following a study session with council where we then give our feedback, ask additional questions, and give feedback to staff. So the first of those meetings will be talking, and it'll be on different areas, basically talking about Moffett Park and kind of the future. The first one will be on November 30th from 4 to 7 p.m. as a Zoom meeting, of course, and that'll focus on sea level rise and urban ecology. The second one will be on December 10th. which will focus on transportation and infrastructure. And the last one will be a little bit farther out, back beginning of February 1st, on land use, housing, and open space. So each of those will kind of be between 4 and 6, the community input, and then starting at sometime after 7 would be the study session based upon council questions and then additional direction to staff. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the county dashboard. So from a county standpoint, things are looking good. From at least it's stabilized. You know, it isn't ticking up. We were definitely worried about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that we were starting to see it surge back up a little bit, and we were worried that it might go back into the red tier, which would close down indoor dining and a few other things. But things have stayed about the same over the last week. The county reported that from a county standpoint, we've had 25,707 cases, which is about 1,000 more than last week, and that's about the same as the week before. So we're about, you know, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 for the last few weeks. We've had 424 deaths, which increased about 20 from last week, and then we currently have 99 hospitalizations, which is up a little from last week. It's about 15 up from last week. So we maintain about the same. From a city standpoint, San Jose continues to have a lot of cases. They've had almost 17,000 cases, 16,900 and something cases, which is about up 50 from last week. And then from a Sunnyvale, they've had 16,000, which is up about 650 from last week. And then the Sunnyvale has had 1,131 cases, which is up about 50 from last week. So we've had a little uptick, but we're remaining, you know, in the 30s, 40s, 50s for the last month or so. So, you know, definitely be careful, be safe. You know, be safe. One of the things that, you know, I continue to do a lot of advocating on your behalf, and at the county level, especially, you know, getting the pop-up van here is critical. So on the 2nd and 4th Mondays at Murphy Park, the county pop-up van will be here. So they'll be back on this coming Monday, the 9th, and then back on November 23rd. And you can go to sccfreetest.org to sign up, and it's all by appointment. You can do drop-in, and they do have a certain amount of capability for drop-ins, but you can easily set up the time, get in and out in under 5 minutes. And, you know, I found it when I did it 2 or 3 weeks ago now, 2 weeks ago, it was very, very easy. So if you need to get tested, if you think you might have been exposed, and one of the reasons why we're still in the orange tier is because we've committed to so much testing, both from the healthcare providers and from a county standpoint. So you know, one of the things that the state is looking at is how many tests are we doing, not just the number of people that are testing positive. So that's the important thing, is keeping that percentage of tests, or the number of tests, up, and then the percentage of people testing positive down. So that's critical. You know, whatever you can do, if you want to get tested, that's possible. El Camino Hospital in Mountain View is doing testing. You know, you can contact them directly, and they're doing testing, free testing for anyone in the district. They're also doing a pop-up event on November 10th, so this upcoming Tuesday, from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you contact El Camino Hospital, you can find out how to get tested, but they're doing that downtown also. So, and El Camino Hospital is for tests for anyone in the district who lives here, who works here, who goes to school here. So, you know, thanks to them for doing that. You know, that's really important. The more people that we get tested, if you think you've been exposed, if you're out, if you're a frontline worker especially, you know, that's really important to get tested. Let's go ahead and get to weekly questions. Jackie asked, what is our water department looking at to stop to combat the rise of Legionella. So Legionella, and we haven't had this issue in Sunnyvale, but ultimately it's the bacteria that goes to that went to Legionnaire's disease, and this is common in well water, and more importantly in stagnant water. So we do lots of testing, and we have, if you know, there's multiple places around the city where we continue to monitor our water on a monthly basis. And one of the things that we do have well tank towers within the city. That's mainly there for emergency water. So we refill them multiple times a year, but that's there for emergencies. We don't utilize well water on a as far as part of our standard system. Other than that emergency storage, we get the majority of our water from two main sources, although there's a third source for a small portion of the city. But the main two sources are SFPUC, the San Francisco Public Utilities, and the Santa Clara Valley Water District, the Silicon Valley Water District. And it's about 50-50 almost between the two of those. And so it's been positive that we're able to kind of play off from a rate standpoint, where we're getting the water from those two sources. And so we continue to monitor that. And one of the issues with Legionella is stagnant water. And from that standpoint, there is a concern, especially for like building shutdowns and warm water and stagnant pipes. And that's the environment for Legionella to multiply. So if there was a chance in being in stagnant pipes, making sure that they're completely cleaned out before people start utilizing that water again is important. And so, I'll connect up with city staff and the school district, especially the school district where we've had a lot of schools that have been not utilized that much for the last 8 months. And so from that standpoint, it's important that they flush their pipes as much as possible before really coming online. And the same thing with like our park buildings and some of our city buildings as we look at opening up over the next 6 months. So definitely it's an important issue, and it's something to bring to their awareness. I found usually when I bring these issues to city staff, they've already been looking at them. So we'll see where we stand as far as that's concerned. Let's see. Other questions? Oh yeah. Again, I got the questions. Will Murphy Avenue stay closed off to cars even after COVID-19? It creates so much more atmosphere to have outside seating, and the walkability is really fun. So yes, hopefully Murphy Avenue will remain closed to only pedestrians. I think that has really changed that feel. It feels a lot more European. This has been brought forward every few years, and I think people are always afraid, especially some of the downtown businesses, that it would really hurt their business. I took to the Downtown Association back in January, can we do it one day a week, Saturdays, year round? And they were considering that when COVID happened. And now, one of the things that when COVID happened, they came back to the mayor, back to city. It's like, how quickly can we do it? I think it's really important that we, streamline the permitting process to allow seating, out into the street, which has kind of made that much better. And from that standpoint, it's given businesses a chance to see how business would really react, how residents would react to being able to be seated outdoors. And I think from what I hear, everything has been fairly positive. There's still always some kinks to work out, but if you like it, definitely continue to tell your businesses that you enjoy it. I've heard from multiple businesses, and I was talking to several members of the Downtown Association this week about it. The majority of them seem to be in favor of it, and all it takes is really their request to come back to the city to say this is what they want to do. So, keep your fingers crossed. I think it makes a big difference for our downtown, and hopefully this will be the new normal as far as downtown Sunnyvale is concerned. I do think it gives a special atmosphere to Murphy Avenue, our historic Murphy Avenue. It also gives, kind of the counterbalance to the city line development of restaurants and the new mall. And then you have that older area where it's completely pedestrian friendly. So I think it's really positive portion from a city standpoint. Let's see, other questions that I got. I think that is about it. Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up a little bit earlier this week. I think that, not as much happened. There weren't as many press conferences. There were a few get out the vote press conferences, but I think that was a little bit easier to deal with this week. I think everybody was busy preparing for election day and then post-election day, seeing if there would be any issues. So things were fairly calm this week to a certain degree, not as much, and I'm happy to get a little rest as far as that's concerned. So thank you for, again, joining me this week. As always, I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. I know it continues to be difficult for many. There are new issues that come up every week, but your response does make a difference. Help your neighbors, make and share masks, share baked goods or fruit that you picked, write, positive chalk messages, put positive messages in your window. How you respond to the ongoing pandemic really is important, especially during these times. Whatever you can do to build our community is critical. I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response, and to see residents helping their neighbors, helping strangers to a large degree. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello from a safe social distance. People really miss that social interaction. I'm looking forward to when there's a vaccine, when things start opening up. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Until next week, stay safe, stay warm, and of course, wear your mask. Okay, take care. Until next week. Goodbye.